Jacksonville City Council held a meeting tonight with one of the agenda items calling for a potential rezone of a residential to a commercial zone.
KLTV's Alex Weister has the latest on that meeting.
Jacksonville City Council and the public discussed earlier tonight the possibility of changing a 1- and 2-family zone into a commercial zone for a potential treatment facility for mental health and substance abuse. The facility would have been located next to the Benson Memorial CME Church, right next to a neighborhood and down the road from schools.
I just don't feel like that placing it where they're talking about doing it is an ideal spot. There are a lot of areas in the city of Jacksonville that can't be used, and that would help Jacksonville grow just that much more.
Pastor Tommy Starks was a member of the public who spoke against the zoning. Troy Dorman, the owner of the group that would have provided the resources, gave a rebuttal to make his case for the facility.
If they're dangerous, they can't come. If their mental health problems are too great, they can't come. If they can't fit into a group conversation and help the group, they can't come. In 20 years, we never one time had an accident, a fight, anything.
City Council spoke briefly after the unanimous denial of the rezoning, stating their appreciation for the work that the facility would provide and did not rule out the potential for having the facility located somewhere else in the city.
We as a city and we as councilmen elected by our constituents have the responsibility to protect those in each of the districts in the current zoning, and probably just felt like it did not fit in that neighborhood.
Alex Weister, KLTV 7 News.
The proposed location of that facility would have been a block away from Fred Douglass Elementary and Jacksonville Middle School.